Today on Forge20, we're making this super cool Slingbow pistol.
2, 3, 4.
Alright, the first thing I did was clear it off the table and laid out all the parts. Obviously, the printer's right here, and it's constantly running and pulling parts off. And this is a long build. So, as I've been pulling parts off, I started setting them up over here. And of course, starting to do the fit-ups and the sanding and polishing on parts where it might need it. Which is what you're going to do as you pull them off the printer if you're doing this. So I'm not going to show you every bit of that. You're going to pull them off, you're going to look at them. But I have these two, which are the ones I'm going to assemble today. But I've started printing the parts for another one, and I'll show you. I printed it with supports. I don't see how you couldn't use supports. It's got this weird S-turn. Let me set the camera up and then I'll show you how taking the supports off. So I highly recommend one of these green mats, by the way. It keeps your screws from rolling around. This is to get these off. I just like to go around and crack the supports off, and you can see in there's I'll have to take a file and run across the bottom just to clean out the groove. And there's always, like this, is a little bit left over, right? And like one of these little flat jeweler screwdrivers, you can just kind of get in there and that does a pretty decent job. Once you put it all together, you'll see if everything slides or the arrows fly out, and you'll see where you need more. Just go around, and there's a little bit more. Get back on camera. There's a little bit more right here. And there's the whole part. Comes out pretty nice, actually. It's reasonably strong. I wouldn't flex it too hard there. This is kind of a thin area, but once these screws get all put together, it's pretty good. And to get the screw holes open, this is supports for the holes to make sure they're the right size. I just use a piece of stainless welding rod, TIG rod, that I sharpen to a point on one end and put a little hook on. I use this for all kinds of stuff, and it's perfect to just get in there and pop out the little holes where the nuts are supposed to go. There's a couple more down on this end. One up here in the corner, firing pin, or for the trigger, I should say. And then you can see, this is the one that he's talking about. Let me make sure I'm on camera. This is the one that he's talking about in the instructions, which you could take with a small file. You see how it's blind, there's nothing on this side. I find that this little tool is actually the exact right thing. You just poke it through a little bit, and the hole clears right out. You don't do any damage to the hole. You can see through it. There you go. You can see through it. And that's pretty much the whole part cleaned up. Now, if I find that, like, see, it came out nice down here. I'm getting my print settings down. It's smooth, so I don't have to worry about the arrow. This is the barrel, where the arrow exits through here. So this is nice. The arrow will slide. And the only thing we're worried about is a little bit on this side in here, where we had a hard time getting the supports out, if the crank will slide on there. But I bet it will. And if it doesn't, we can always go get a Dremel and clean up those with one of those little edge discs. So the only other thing about this part, which is the magazine size, this is the biggest part build. So for me, I could print it in one piece. There's a 2-piece file for this too, which has some flanges through the middle, in much the same way that this one does. For the sides, see how it has this little S notch that it all goes together like that. So there's 2 files for this if your printer is too small, but this 1-piece file is in the 200 by 200 folder, but my bed is actually 250 by 250. So if I turn this diagonally on the print bed and eliminate the skirt, I could print it in one shot. But with the skirt, no matter how I oriented it, there was always a little bit of the supports and the skirt sticking off on one corner or the other. But once I figured out it's about a negative 10 or 15 degree rotation, so the part sits like that, and then it's just cocked a little bit and then dragged all the way up to one corner and turn the skirt off, and that will get this printed. And all these parts I printed at 100% infill, so this, because I wanted them to be strong, and this part is 9.5 hours or something like that. You can cut down a little bit on some of the other parts, I think, but I wouldn't really recommend it. There's a lot of force going on with this thing, so it's probably better to have it at 100% infill. But the total print time on this build was definitely 88 plus hours, exactly as indicated in the instructions. So the other pieces I need to glue are the 2 halves of the caulking lever. So we'll do that now. And there is the caulking lever glued. I got good squeeze out there, so it was a bunch to clean up, but it was good. It filled in all the little cracks. Just a little bit like that, so you can just take and just wipe it off with your finger and squeeze it in so it fills in those little cracks. And there is the completed crank arm. I didn't really like the finish when you get the glue on the surface there, so I sanded it real quick and then touched it with a little spray paint. And now it looks much better. Let's see if that'll... Of course, now we gotta let that dry. And there's the 2 together. You can see it leaves, the plastic leaves a little white residue on the surface, which you can then sand off or paint or whatever you want to do, or try not to get it on there if you don't want it on your surface. And the small screwdriver on the Leatherman was super handy for cleaning out the little gook and the booger snots in the hole, which, especially on this one where it's thick and you're putting on a lot, I recommend doing it fast before the epoxy sets. And that's easy to get out of the holes, and the screws help hold the whole thing together. I'll tell you what, thank goodness for 3D printing, because doing it the old-fashioned way, this is of course a chopstick with a dart flight super glued into the back of it. Doing it this way is terrible. Of course, you all know the best way to get super glue off your fingers is with sandpaper, right? And of course, you know that super glue was invented for wound closure, because it bonds instantly to skin, human skin. Therefore, no first aid kit is complete without it. On the other hand, I bet most of you don't know that when you do put it in a wound, it burns like a mug. So there is the trigger group in the magazine box. Preliminary assembly, which I'm not going to show you on camera because it's super pain to get in. I actually made a modification to the trigger. Here's the whole series of triggers, starting with the stock trigger. And what I wanted to do was add that little nipple on there to hold the spring during assembly. And I went through a bunch of iterations. I think this was actually the first, and then every iteration was trying to get it smaller and smaller until the one I have in there now is this one with the little thing in there. It looks a little tiny bit different, but it makes it a lot easier to get the spring in there, which is good because I used a much stronger spring, I think, than what is called for. Because when this is all screwed together, it's very tight and it doesn't want to come back when I used that spring, which is the one that fits in there. So I had to go with a bigger spring, which is more like this one, but a little longer. So, but there it is, put in. And if you want the file for that trigger, so you can do the same thing, I'll put a link in the description. I'll put it up on someplace. You guys can download it for free. That is the trigger box assembled. Trigger. You can see this one goes up, locks open, spring, locks shut. You can see it's alright, so there's the finished assembled pistol. It was really quite a joy to get the front end together. If I was gonna do a bunch of these, like assembly line type, I would build a jig to hold all the pieces in the front end, because there is 5 pieces with no alignment tabbing whatsoever that you have to get lined up and get these bolts through. I also had to swap these bolts from 3mm to 4mm because this is the United States and nobody's got 3mm by 35mm bolts. In the hardware store, you can order them, but you can't get them regularly. And I go to a good hardware store that has a ton of hardware, and there's no way that there was all these 3mm sizes. There's just, he's calling out a lot of really long 3mm stuff. So you can either substitute 440 or go up to 4mm, especially on the front end. I think it actually benefits from being 4mm. The screws are a little sturdier. So I started making the bowstring, and I was having a lot of trouble getting these 3D printed parts to print because they're very tiny. And as you can see here, there's a bunch of little, like, they just failed over and over again because they were so small. And this is supposed to hold the spool, which I thought, gee, that spool looks an awful lot like a bobbin, and I have a ton of bobbins, so I just used a bobbin. And instead of the piece of aluminum angle to bolt everything through, I just screwed it down to a piece of wood. Let's not forget that we knew how to make stuff before 3D printing. I wouldn't have thought that I would bleed while making a bowstring, but nevertheless, it happened. I only cut myself a little bit. Don't ask. There's the bowstring. It's not perfect, but it'll definitely do for a test. I used some of this parachute cord for the core, wrapped 7 times around the pins, and then seized the whole thing with thread. Now for the rubber bands. There it is with the bow on. It's a little uneven, which I could probably adjust that, but it's on there. Let's give it a shot. Holy cow. It did better than the throwing darts did, that's for sure. Whew. Okay, so first test. See how this one's a little longer now? It's because it was a little shorter before and it broke on like the fourth shot. So I replaced it. I added a little more band, and it is now so powerful that it drove the head up into the dart. So I'm gonna save these four until I can shoot them outside and show you guys the full deal before I destroy the darts. Alright, so just a few shots, and you can see already that things are getting out of whack. Okay, here's another point. I bought this TheraBand a long time ago, like maybe 7 years ago or something, and it's been sitting in a bag, in a box, all this time. And I was under the impression that the gold, TheraBand Gold, is the strongest color, I guess, the most resistance. And I just went and looked up online to double check, and it turns out that the yellow is extra light, the red is light, and the blue is heavy. There's a black that's even heavier, and there's a green that's in the middle there. But this is light, medium, and heavy, basically. So I'm going to make some new bands, and we'll try the heavy stuff. Oh, and I made a better string. Tried to do a nicer job this time. So hopefully this one lasts a little bit longer than 10 shots. And there we go. Let's give it a shot. So here's the pistol. We're outside. We're going to take a couple shots with it. That's how you pop the magazine. I just want to take this one dart off the top. There's already 3 of the little darts in there. Here, I'll show you one. I printed all these. They just have a little screw in the top. I have some others that have points. We'll try these first though. And this is a little homemade broadhead that I made, and we'll try that one last, just in case it fits. So this thing, you just crank it. I wish the catch was a little bit better. You always got to wiggle it around to make it go. But there it is. Let's see if we can. Well, it's going in the right direction. There we go. Well, that's not bad. And it won't let you cock it forward when it's empty. The hook on the magazine spring catches on the string. So you have to open it up, and then we can reload. And this time I'm going to try these little ones that I printed, and they have a little standard archery bullet head on the top. So we'll give these a shot. They're a little heavier, the points. Alright, there's 4 of them in there. Oh, that was a fail. What happened there? I think we didn't catch the string with the trigger spring, and it vaulted one of the darts. There we go. See, this thing's a little dangerous. Yeah, see, they go a little slower, but they hit a little harder, maybe. Bad. Last one. Okay, pretty good. Now let's try the broadhead. Now, I did try one of these before, and it had a little problem, like it got stuck in the front. It's all with making sure that the the vanes lay flat in the magazine so nothing gets stuck. Let's try this one. Keep it pointed in a safe direction. Woo! Curved off to the left there, but went pretty good. All right, that's it. That's the little 3D printed Slingbow pistol. I hope you guys like it. I just pulled some of the darts out of the target. You can see that the little bullet tip has smashed down into the arrow body, and the same thing on this one. They hit really hard, and those little bullet tips, it's very thin up here near the top of the arrow, so they break easily. I mean, luckily they're 3D printed, so I can just 3D print more. The little ones with the screw in the front, they seem to have survived a little better. So, that's one of the little screw ones that got stuck in the bark. It's really got a lot of thump to it. It hits pretty hard. And if you did enjoy the video, don't forget to hit like and subscribe. Thanks. Forge 20. Da-da-da!